Our guest today is Mason Winfield, talking about his newest book, Haunted Rochester. Welcome, Mason.
Thanks for having me.
Your first book on ghosts in Western New York came out in 1997. Haunted Rochester just came out in July 2008. Ghost stories in the paranormal are very popular. What is there about Haunted Rochester that is going to intrigue readers?
I think the depth of the research and the connections we make. Television tends to give people one idea about ghosts and psychic folklore. Our research hopefully points out a lot of the other connections. TV gives you the idea that everything spooky that happens around a house is probably being caused by spirits. My skeptical friends would tell you that spooky stuff doesn't happen. I'm kind of in the middle, but I'm looking for patterns, and I find that there's a very interesting pattern in the way people report seeing ghosts. Very consistent, incidentally, among eyewitnesses. And there's a very interesting pattern in the kinds of places that tend to build up ghost stories over the centuries.
How does Rochester compare with other cities or communities as a paranormal hotspot?
Every place has psychic folklore. It's very common. Psychic report, wherever people live, there's going to be ghost stories. Rochester is certainly as rich as, at least as rich as anywhere else I've ever looked at. On the other hand, there haven't been any terrific studies of the ghost stories and the ghost sightings of Rochester, so we were pretty much blazing our trail. We did have a lot of help from a small book called Valley of the Ghosts by Shirley Cox Husted, and she definitely put together some of the folklore for us. But as far as anything after that, there wasn't much out there. Rochester's history and its geology are right in there with that pattern that tends to be associated with a lot of ghost stories. Native American settlement, geological power, a very active wartime past in Rochester and the area of the Lower Genesee.
Are there any ley lines going through the area that might contribute to this?
Well, the subject of leys is a big one. You would have to get an agreement on the definition of a ley. Other than people that are intuitive for this, walking around and saying, "Oh, there's a ley right over there," there isn't much of a study. If there is, I would love to know of it. As a matter of fact, I would like to do such a study. I've just started up a new society, and maybe that's what we are going to be trying to do. But a ley alignment is a connection of sacred sites. At the baseline definition of a ley is a connection of sacred sites, a straight line pattern across landscape. I know of no study that's been done of that in Monroe County.
Mason, you've been writing about upstate New York supernatural for a decade. How did it all start?
A lot of the things we do in life are career decisions. I was an English teacher. I was ready to leave education. And I wanted to try a freelance career. I wanted to write books. And I knew that many authors don't live well off of royalties. I needed to have sort of a spin-off career that would spin off the books. And I knew the popularity of the subject of ghosts and the paranormal. It was among my interests. But we've all got things we are interested in, and we have not decided to go professional with them. This appeared to be the most instantly marketable of the things I was interested in. I also love Celtic mythology, and you'd have to get a PhD from Harvard and then maybe get hired. Whereas, with a ghost, you just, off you go.
Are there 21st century ghost stories happening now? Is there a danger of running out of ghost material? Do you see more local ghost books in your future?
I'm definitely going to write more books, and probably some of them will be regional surveys of the paranormal, if not ghosts. Ghost stories are always reports. They're always happening. They're only history when they're a certain distance in the past, you know. So 50 years from now, people will be looking upon the stories of 2008 with a venerable sense of nostalgia. Ghost stories are always happening.
Do people actually send you ghost stories, ghosts they've seen recently?
Yeah, people do send me a lot of write-ups, usually via email, but you know, I get the occasional correspondence in the mail. I appreciate that very much when people do offer stories. Now, it's not always something I can use in a book, but it broadens my understanding of sites and regions and human nature. So it's even if I never write about it, it's very helpful.
Mason, could you tell us more about some of the content in Haunted Rochester?
You know, there are a lot of other books about ghosts being written nowadays, and a lot of them are semi-fictionalized and very imaginative, you know. And some of them are just investigations, renditions, sites. And to us, a lot of this is wild and whirling words, as Hamlet says. You know, it's not really giving a deep perspective of people in a region, the history of a region. You know, we really wanted to get into the past, the perspective, and we started with Native American related ghost stories. We moved on to stories related to the wartime past of Rochester. You know, we really wanted to split our book up into logical chapters that would give the reader a perspective not only on Rochester, but give them some breadth into the business of collecting psychic folklore. And we wanted to give a representative sample of the famous ghosts, famous personalities who come back as ghosts. And we also wanted to give a representative sample of the prominent haunted sites. And we wanted to do that with a historical perspective in mind. And we also paid a lot of attention to architecture, because there is a connection between architecture and ghost stories. And we wanted to make sure we touched upon the X-Files of ghost stories. That is, these nameless, formless beasties that, you know, nobody in the neighborhood knows what they are, but oh man, are they scared of them.
Right now, our listeners are probably wondering, who is Mason Winfield? Tell us some about yourself and your background and how it relates to writing Haunted Rochester.
I had a good BA, a good general undergraduate education at Denison University in Ohio. I majored in basically, I was an English major, but I could have minored in classics, did a lot of Latin. And I was always into folklore and mythology, and I really think that this broadens you. Because, you know, folklore and mythology is the supernaturalism of the past.
How do you go about tracking down ghosts, and what kind of sources do you use? And do you actually visit the ghost sites and try to connect with the spirits? And how important is the documentation when writing about the paranormal?
Okay. I would like to make it plain that I am not a psychic. I do not visit buildings, talk to the spirits, and tell you what they're saying. I do not mean to ridicule people who can, or, you know, believe they can, or whatever. I'm not, you know, I don't do that. I'm a researcher and a historian, and I've chosen this subject to be a historian of. We did our research for Haunted Rochester very strategically. I went through, first of all, I'm sort of the supernatural historian of Western New York, and this is a smaller focus. So I went through absolutely everything I had ever published about Monroe County and sifted through that to see what, you know, was going to be useful in the book. We deputized a lot of the research. I would talk to Reverend Tim or John Kerner or Rob Lockhart and say, look, can you track this one down? If it was something I just couldn't get to, but very strategic. Historical societies are very helpful. Old newspaper and magazines, believe it or not. Now that's not going to prove that there's a ghost there, but it's going to prove that there is tradition about a place.
Where can people get Haunted Rochester? Do you have a website?
I have a website. It's myname.com, masonwinfield.com. The book is published by the History Press, based in Charleston, South Carolina, and all the big bookstores in Monroe County have got the book. Barnes & Noble, Borders, all of them.
Can people get it on Amazon?
I'm sure you can get the book on Amazon.
Well, thank you, Mason Winfield, for visiting Wood Library and telling us about your newest ghost book, Haunted Rochester, The Supernatural History of the Lower Genesee.
Thanks very much for having me, and keep the ghost stories coming.